The mud-caked boots slammed against the porch steps as Corbin Whitlock stumbled backward, his weathered hands instinctively reaching for the rifle that wasn't there. Standing before him was the smallest tornado he'd ever seen, a wild-haired girl of maybe 8 years, her faded calico dress torn at the hem, clutching a rusted lantern like a weapon. "Mister," she hollered, her voice carrying the urgency of summer lightning. "My sister Marlo's gonna die if you don't come right now." Corbin blinked hard, wondering if the moonshine he'd been nursing had finally addled his brain. The child's eyes blazed with desperate fire, and behind her, through the thick Missouri woods, he could see the orange glow of flames licking at the night sky. "Slow down there, little wildcat," he drawled, his voice rough from years of silence in these hills. "What's your name, and where's this sister of yours?" "I'm Belinda Hawthorne, and Marlo's trapped in our cabin." She grabbed his calloused hand with surprising strength. The roof beam fell, and she can't get out, and the fire's spreading fast. Without another word, Corbin snatched his axe from the woodpile and followed the child into the darkness. His bare feet found purchase on the familiar forest floor as they ran, branches whipping at his face. The smell of smoke grew thicker with each stride. "How'd you know to come to me?" he panted, his long legs easily keeping pace with her frantic steps. "Marlo always said, if trouble came, find the hermit who lives in the stone house by Copper Creek." Belinda gasped. "Dad said you used to be someone important before you came to hide in these woods." The cabin materialized through the trees like a vision from hell, flames crawling up the walls, windows glowing orange, smoke pouring from every gap. Corbin could hear someone coughing violently inside. "Marlo," Belinda screamed, starting toward the door. Corbin caught her around the waist, lifting her clear off the ground. "You stay put, you hear me?" He studied the burning structure with the calculating eye of a man who'd seen his share of disasters. The front door was blocked by fallen timber, but the side window might still be accessible. The roof groaned ominously overhead. "Please hurry," Belinda whispered, tears cutting clean. Tracks through the soot on her cheeks. "She's all I got left in this world. Mama and Papa died of the fever last winter, and Marlo's been taking care of me ever since." Corbin felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been sealed shut for 3 years, ever since he'd fled Chicago and the memories that haunted him there. He'd come to these Missouri hills to die alone, but fate seemed to have other plans. "Listen to me, little wildcat," he said, setting Belinda down and gripping her shoulders. "I'm going to get your sister out, but I need you to run to the creek and soak these blankets." He pulled 2 wool throws from his pack. "Can you do that for me?" Belinda nodded fiercely, snatching the blankets and disappearing into the darkness. Corbin hefted his axe and approached the burning cabin. Through the smoke-stained window, caught his first glimpse of Marlo Hawthorne, golden hair matted with debris, green eyes wide with terror, trapped beneath a massive oak beam. Even through the haze and fear, he could see she was beautiful, in that wild, untamed way that belonged to these hills. Their eyes met through the glass, and something electric passed between them. "Hold on, darling," he called out, raising his axe. "I'm coming for you." The window exploded inward as Corbin's axe shattered the glass, sending shards scattering across the burning floorboards. Heat slammed into him like a physical blow, singeing his beard and stealing the breath from his lungs. But all he could see were those emerald eyes, fierce and unbroken despite the terror. "Can you move at all?" he shouted over the crackling flames. Marlo coughed, her voice hoarse from smoke. "Legs pinned, but I think it's just trapped, not broken." She struggled against the massive beam, her calico dress darkened with sweat and soot. "You need to get out of here before the whole roof comes down." "Not without you," Corbin growled, sliding through the window frame with practiced efficiency. The heat was unbearable, like standing inside a blacksmith's forge. But he'd endured worse in the war. He dropped to his knees beside her, studying the fallen beam. Oak, probably 300 pounds, wedged at an angle that made leverage nearly impossible. The flames were creeping closer, eating their way across the rough-hewn floor. "What's your name?" Marlo asked suddenly, her eyes locked on his face. "Corbin?" He positioned his hands under the beam, muscles bunching beneath his worn shirt. "Why?" "Because I want to know the name of the man who's about to die trying to save me." Something in her voice, resigned but grateful, brave even in the face of death, made Corbin pause. Nobody's dying today if I have anything to say about it. Belinda's voice cut through the roar of flames from outside. Mr. Corbin, I got the blankets. Good girl, he called back. Stay clear of the window. Corbin braced his feet against the floor and heaved with everything he had. The beam shifted slightly, groaning against the floor joists.
Hallelujah. Marlon did.
Back a cry as the weight redistributed across her trapped leg. Again she gasped, moved. This time, Corbin let out a roar that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his soul, from the part of him that had carried wounded soldiers through Confederate artillery. It's from the place where his buried strength lived. The beam lifted 6 inches. Now, he commanded. Marlo twisted sideways, dragging her leg free, just as Corbin's strength gave out, and the beam crashed back down, sending up a shower of sparks. But she was free. Corbin scooped her into his arms without ceremony, her slight weight. Nothing compared to the beam. She wrapped her arms around his neck, and for a moment that felt suspended outside of time. Their faces were inches apart, her breath warm against his cheek, despite the hellish heat surrounding them. Thank you, she whispered, and the words carried more weight than any declaration of love he'd ever heard. The roof beam above them cracked like a gunshot. Corbin lunged toward the window as burning timber rained down behind them. He twisted his body to shield Marlo as they tumbled through the opening, landing hard in the dirt outside just as the entire structure collapsed in an explosion of flames and sparks. Belinda threw herself at them, covering both her sister and Corbin with the soaked blankets. Marlo. Oh, Marlo, I thought you were gone. The three of them lay there for a moment, breathing hard, watching the cabin that had been the Hawthorne sisters' home reduce itself to glowing embers and ash. Well, Marlo said finally, her voice shaky but touched with something that might have been laughter. I guess we're homeless now. Corbin looked down at the woman in his arms, her soot-streaked face illuminated by the dying fire. He felt the walls around his heart crumble like the burning cabin. No, he said quietly. Not. Dawn painted the Missouri sky in shades of rose and gold as Corbin led the two sisters through the forest toward his stone cottage by Copper Creek. Marlo walked with a slight limp, her injured leg tender but functional, while Belinda chattered away like a magpie, her earlier terror transformed into excitement at their adventure. You really used to live in Chicago? Belinda asked, skipping alongside Corbin's long strides. What did you do there? Built things. Corbin replied simply, his eyes flicking to Marlo, who walked in contemplative silence. Bridges mostly. Big iron spans across rivers. Why'd you leave? This from Marlo, her first words since they'd started walking. Corbin was quiet for so long that Belinda started to ask another question, but Marlo shushed her with a look. Finally, he spoke. Sometimes a man builds something that falls down, and sometimes people die when it falls. The weight of his words settled over them like morning mist. Marlo studied his profile, the strong jaw, the eyes that held too much knowledge of loss, the way his shoulders carried an invisible burden. Was it your fault? She asked gently. The investigation said no. Faulty steel from the foundry. Corbin's. The voice was flat, emotionless, but I should have caught it. I should have tested every beam myself instead of trusting the reports. They crested a small hill. His cottage came into view, a sturdy structure, built from native fieldstone, with a shake roof and windows that caught the morning light like jewels. Smoke curled from the chimney, and a vegetable garden sprawled beside it in neat rows. It's beautiful, Marlo breathed, and something in her voice made Corbin's chest tighten. It's simple, he corrected, but he felt proud showing it to her, which surprised him. Belinda ran ahead to splash in the creek, but Marlo lingered beside Corbin on the porch. Up close, in the gentle morning light, he could see that she was even more striking than he'd realized in the chaos of the fire. Her golden hair caught the sun, and her eyes held depths that spoke of wisdom beyond her years. How old are you? He asked suddenly. 23, she smiled. Old enough to know you didn't bring us here just out of kindness. What heat that had nothing to do with fire crept up Corbin's neck. I don't know what you mean, don't you? Marlo stepped closer, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she must have used to wash her hair, somehow surviving even the smoke and terror of the night before. "You looked at me through that window like you'd been waiting your whole life to see my face?" Marlowe ... he started, but she pressed her fingers against his lips. "I felt it too," she whispered, "like lightning in my chest, like coming home to a place I'd never been." Before Corbin could respond, Belinda's voice rang out from the creek. "Marlowe, come see these fish. They're swimming right up to me." The spell broke, and Marlowe stepped back, color flooding her cheeks. "I should. She needs breakfast." "There's bacon and eggs in the kitchen," Corbin managed. "Coffee too." As Marlowe headed inside, Belinda came running up from the creek, dripping, wet and grinning. She grabbed Corbin's hand with both of hers, her small fingers surprisingly warm. "You like my sister, don't you?" she announced with the devastating directness of childhood. "Belinda, it's okay," the little girl continued, earnestly. "Marlowe's been lonely since Mama and Papa died. She tries to hide it, but I hear her crying sometimes at night. She needs someone to take care of her for a change." Corbin knelt down until he was at eye level with her. "Your sister's stronger than any woman I've ever met. She doesn't need taking care of." "Everybody needs taking care of sometimes," Belinda said with 8-year-old wisdom. "Even strong people. Even you." Through the window, Corbin could see Marlowe moving around his kitchen, making coffee in the pot he'd barely used since coming. "To the hills." She'd tied her hair back with a piece of string, and she hummed softly as she worked the first truly peaceful sound he'd heard in 3 years. "She likes you too," Belinda whispered conspiratorially. "I can tell." 3 days later, Corbin found himself in a predicament he'd never imagined. The Hawthorne sisters had settled into his cottage like they belonged there, and he discovered that solitude which he'd craved for 3 years was suddenly the last thing he wanted. Marlowe had taken over his kitchen with gentle efficiency, producing meals that made his bachelor fare of beans and hardtack seem like punishment. She'd also somehow managed to organize his chaotic workshop, sorting his tools and cleaning years of neglect from his workbench. "You don't have to do all this," he protested, finding her mending one of his torn shirts by the window. "I know," she replied, not looking up from her stitching. "I want to." The simple words hit him like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had wanted to do something for him? Belinda had adopted him as her personal project, following him around the property and chattering endlessly about everything and nothing. She'd also appointed herself matchmaker with all the subtlety of a charging bull. "Corbin, did you know Marlowe can sing?" she announced at breakfast. "She has the prettiest voice in 3 counties. Mama used to say she could charm birds from the trees." Belinda, Marlowe warned, her cheeks flushing pink. "Dan, she's the best cook too. Mrs. Henderson at the general store always said apple pie could make a man propose marriage on the spot." "That's enough," Marlowe said firmly. But Corbin caught the smile, tugging at her lips. That evening, he found himself on the porch with Marlowe while Belinda slept inside. The summer air was thick with the sound of crickets and the distant call of a whippoorwill. "She's not wrong, you know," Marlowe said suddenly. "About what?" "The singing." She turned to face him, her eyes reflecting starlight. "Would you like to hear?" Corbin nodded, not trusting his voice. Marlowe began to sing softly, a ballad he didn't recognize about love found and lost and found again. Her voice was like honey poured over broken glass, sweet and rough and utterly captivating. As the last notes faded into the night, Corbin realized he'd been holding his breath. That was ... Cleared his throat. "That was beautiful. My mother taught me that song," he said. "It was about second chances, about how love sometimes comes when we least expect it, when we think we're too broken for anyone to want us." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning. "Marlowe," Corbin began, but she held up a hand. "I know what you're going to say, that you're too old for me, too damaged, to set in your ways, that a woman like me deserves better than a hermit. With ghosts in his past, you do deserve better," she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do you know what my life was before the fire? Working my fingers raw, taking in washing and mending to keep food on our table, watching Belinda grow up too fast because she had to help carry burdens no child should know. Lying awake at night, wondering if we'd make it through another winter. She turned to face him fully, her eyes blazing with the same fire he'd seen when she was trapped beneath that beam. You saved my life, Corbin. But more than that, for the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe. Like maybe there's room in this world for something besides just surviving. Before he could respond, she leaned over and kissed him, soft and tentative at first, then with growing certainty as he kissed her back. She tasted like apple cider and hope, and Corbin felt something inside him that had been dead for 3 years, suddenly, miraculously, come back to life when they broke apart. Both breathing hard, Belinda's voice drifted from the darkened doorway. Finally, she said with deep satisfaction, "Now can we be a real family?" The morning brought unexpected visitors in the form of 3 rough-looking men on horseback, led by a lean, hawk-faced character who introduced himself as Silas Crenshaw. "Heard there was a fire up at the old Hawthorne place," Crenshaw said, his pale eyes scanning the cottage with obvious interest. "Terrible shame that. Hope the girls made it out all right." Corbin stepped protectively in front of the door, every instinct screaming danger. "They're fine. What's your business here?" "That's the thing." Crenshaw's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "See, their daddy owed me considerable money before he passed. Was going to take the cabin as payment, but now that it's burned." He shrugged. "Reckon I'll have to collect from his daughters instead." "Like hell you will," Corbin growled. Behind him, he heard the cottage door open and Marlowe's sharp intake of breath. "Silas," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "Papa never mentioned any debt to you." "Of course he didn't, honey. Man's got his pride." Crenshaw dismounted, his hand resting casually on the gun at his hip. "Ought debts don't die with the debtor. Law's the law." "Show me the papers," Corbin demanded. Crenshaw produced a folded document from his vest, but held it just out of reach. "All legal and proper, signed and witnessed. $300 plus interest. Comes to near 500 now." Marlowe's face went white. "We don't have that kind of money." "I know you don't, sweetheart, but I'm a reasonable man." His eyes crawled over her in a way that made Corbin's hands clench into fists. "Pretty girl like you, I'm sure we can work out some kind of ... arrangement." "Over my dead body," Corbin snarled, taking a step forward. "That can be arranged too," said one of Crenshaw's men, a barrel-chested brute with arms like tree trunks. The tension stretched taut as a bowstring. Then Belinda appeared in the doorway, took one look at the scene, and made a decision that would change everything. "Mr. Corbin's gonna marry my sister," she announced loudly. "So if you got business with her, you got business with him." Crenshaw's eyebrows shot up. "That's so? Well, congratulations. But a husband inherits his wife's debts along with everything else." "Fine," Corbin said quietly. "I'll pay it." "Corbin!" "No," Marlowe started, but he silenced her with a look. "I'll pay the debt," he repeated. "But I want to see that paper first." Crenshaw hesitated, then handed over the document. Corbin examined it carefully, his engineer's mind noting details that might have escaped someone else's notice. "This is dated last month," he said finally. So Nathan Hawthorne died 4 months ago? Hard to sign a debt contract when you're in the ground. Crenshaw's face darkened. "You calling me a liar? Calling you a forger and a fraud?" "Ah!" Corbin tore the paper in half. "And I'm telling you to get off my land before I decide to do something about it." The 3 men exchanged glances. The barrel-chested one started to reach for his gun, but Crenshaw stopped him with a gesture. "This ain't over," Crenshaw warned. "Girl's still gonna be my wife, one way or another. Been watching her for months and I always get what I want." "Then you'd better get used to disappointment," Marlowe said, stepping up beside Corbin and slipping her hand into his. "Because I'm taken." After the men rode off, the 3 of them stood in tense silence on the porch. "They'll be back," Corbin said finally. "I know." Marlowe squeezed his hand. "I'm sorry I brought this trouble on you. You didn't bring anything I can't handle." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "But Belinda was right about one thing. If you're going to be under my protection, it should be legal." Marlowe's breath caught. Korben ... "I'm asking," he said simply. "Will you marry me, Marlowe?" "Hawthorne." Before she could answer, Belinda whooped with joy. I told you she was perfect for you." The wedding took place 3 days later in the small church in town, officiated by Pastor Williams with half the village in attendance. News of the mysterious hermit by Copper Creek taking a bride had spread like wildfire, and curiosity had drawn folks from miles around. Marlowe wore a simple blue dress borrowed from the pastor's wife, with wildflowers in her hair that Belinda had picked at dawn. She'd never looked more beautiful, Corbin thought, watching her walk down the aisle with quiet dignity, despite the whispered speculation of the townsfolk. "Do you, Corbin Whitlock, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Pastor Williams intoned. "I do," Corbin replied, his voice carrying clearly through the small church. "And do you, Marlowe Hawthorne, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Marlowe looked into Corbin's eyes, seeing past the gruff exterior to the gentle soul beneath. "I do." As they kissed to seal their vows, Belinda clapped so enthusiastically from the front pew that several people chuckled, spite themselves. But the celebration was short-lived as they emerged from the church to the bright afternoon sunlight. Silas Crenshaw was waiting with twice as many men as before. The townspeople scattered like leaves in a wind, wanting no part of whatever was about to unfold. "Well, well," Crenshaw drawled, "but ain't the happy couple? And congratulations, Whitlock. You just inherited yourself a world of trouble. Whatever you think you're owed, it died with the fake paper you showed me," Corbin replied calmly, positioning himself between Crenshaw and his new family. "Oh, this ain't about money anymore." Crenshaw's smile was pure malice. "This is about a man taking what belongs to me. Been courting that girl for months before you showed up." "Courting?" Hello's voice was sharp with disbelief. "You call following me around town and making crude comments courting? Woman needs to know her?" "Place," Crenshaw snarled, "and yours is with me." "Her place," said a new voice, "is wherever she chooses it to be." Everyone turned to see a tall, distinguished man in a fine suit stepping out of a carriage that had just arrived. He carried himself with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Judge Hamilton," Pastor Williams said with obvious relief. "Thank goodness you're here." The judge surveyed the scene with cold eyes. "Mr. Crenshaw, I believe we've discussed your business practices before." Crenshaw's face went pale. "Judge, I was just what? Threatening newlyweds. On their wedding day? Intimidating citizens with armed men?" Hamilton's voice could have cut glass. "I have it on good authority that your last 3 debt collections involved forged documents. You can't prove that, can't I?" The judge smiled thinly. "Marshal Stevens has been very interested in your activities. In fact, there's a warrant with your name on it, back in the county seat." Crenshaw's hand moved toward his gun, but he found himself looking down the barrel of Corbin's rifle. When had he gotten that? "I wouldn't," Corbin advised quietly. "I was a sharpshooter in the war. Never missed what I was aiming at." The standoff stretched for long moments. Then Crenshaw seemed to deflate, realizing he was outmatched and outgunned. "This ain't over," he muttered, but the fight had gone out of him. "Yes, it is," Judge Hamilton said firmly. "You and your men have exactly 10 minutes to be out of my county. After that, any of you still here will be enjoying the hospitality of my jail." As Crenshaw and his gang rode away in defeat, the judge turned to Corbin and Marlowe. "I apologize for that unpleasantness on your wedding day," he said warmly. "Knew your father, excuse me, Mrs. Whitlock. He was a good man who never owed anybody a dime. When I heard about Crenshaw's claims, I thought I'd better investigate personally." "Thank you, Judge," Marlowe said gratefully. "Think nothing of it. Now, I believe there's supposed to be cake at a wedding." As they walked back toward the church hall where the ladies had prepared a reception, Belinda tugged on Corbin's coat. "Really were a sharpshooter?" she asked with wide eyes. "Among other things," he replied. "What other things?" Corbin smiled down at his new sister-in-law. "I'll tell you all about it sometime. We've got plenty of time now." 6 months later, the stone cottage by Copper Creek had been transformed into something that truly resembled a home. Marlowe's touch was evident everywhere: curtains at the windows, flowers in the garden, the smell of fresh bread always lingering in the air. Corbin had built an addition to give Belinda her own room, and he'd started taking on carpentry work for the local farmers. slowly rebuilding his reputation as a craftsman. But the most dramatic change was in Corbin himself. The haunted look had faded from his eyes, replaced by something that could only be called contentment. He smiled more, laughed at Belinda's jokes, and had even started attending church with his wife. On this particular spring morning, he was teaching Belinda how to fish in the creek, while Marlowe worked in her expanded garden. The little girl had grown taller over the winter, but she'd lost none of her fierce energy or her talent for asking impossible questions. "Corbin," she said, carefully watching her line in the water, "are you glad we found you that night?" "Every single day," he replied, without hesitation. "Even when I track mud through the house and Marlowe fusses at me? Especially then?" Belinda grinned. "Good, because I got something to tell you." Something in her tone made him look at her sharply. "What kind of something?" "The kind where you're going to be a papa?" Corbin's fishing rod slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers. "What?" "Marlowe told me this morning. She wanted to tell you herself tonight at dinner, but I'm terrible at keeping secrets." Melinda's eyes sparkled with mischief. "She's been feeling sick in the mornings, and Mrs. Henderson at the store said that means there's a baby coming." Corbin stared at the little girl, his mind reeling. A baby. His child. Marlowe's child. The family he'd never dared to dream of was growing. "Better act surprised when she tells you," Belinda warned. "She's been planning this special dinner all week." That evening, as promised, Marlowe had prepared his favorite meal roast chicken with her famous apple pie for dessert. She seemed nervous, fidgeting with her napkin and barely touching her own food. "Corbin," she said finally, "there's something I need to tell you." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it together. We're going to have a baby." The words hung in the air between them, precious and fragile and full of promise. Corbin felt his throat tighten with emotion he couldn't quite name. "How do you feel about that?" Marlowe asked softly, searching his face. For an answer, Corbin stood up, walked around the table, and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed with pure joy. When he set her down, there were tears in both their eyes. "I love you, Marlowe Whitlock," he said, his voice rough with feeling, "and I'm going to love our child more than I ever thought possible." "We all are," Belinda chimed in from the doorway, where she'd been eavesdropping with absolutely no shame. "I'm going to be the best aunt in Missouri." As the three of them soon-to-be embraced in the warm light of their kitchen, Corbin reflected on the strange turns life could take. A year ago, he'd been a broken man hiding in the wilderness, convinced he had nothing left to offer the world. Now he was a husband, a soon-to-be father, and a guardian to the most determined little matchmaker who'd ever lived. Sometimes, the most perfect love stories began with the simplest words from the smallest people. Sometimes all it took was one little girl, brave enough to run through a burning forest to find help, wise enough to see what two adults were too scared to admit, and bold enough to announce to the world, "My big sister is perfect for you." Take care of us both, and sometimes if you were very lucky, you got the chance to spend the rest of your life doing exactly that, outside. Copper Creek sang its eternal song, and the Missouri hills held their secrets close, and in the stone cottage, where a hermit had once lived alone, a family slept peacefully, dreaming of all the tomorrows yet to come.